Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of the podcast. My name is Daniel. This is the Daniel Teacher's Experience here, where the psychology student shares his 2 cents on life from his lectures, his textbooks, personal anecdotes, things that I see, things that I think might bring a value to you. If this is your first time listening, welcome. I've got a plethora of episodes out already about depression, anxiety, trauma, so definitely make sure to check those out on YouTube, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, you know what it is. Today, folks, we're going to talk about labeling and the power of labeling and really the psychology of putting people into boxes in tribalism. Now, I'm going to do this in 2 ways. One, I'm going to start off by talking about the micro, so the individual. And then 2, we're going to take away from the micro and look at the macro, which is going to be looking at social psychology. Let's paint us a picture. You and me are at this party, and we see this attractive young lady. And you point her out to me, go, wow, Danny, look at that attractive young lady. And I go, hey man, that girl, she's insane. Be very careful. You go, why? I say, she's manipulative. She's selfish. She lies. Don't believe a word that comes out of her mouth. This is the most two-faced person you'll ever meet in your entire life, right? Mind you, you've never met that person. You don't know if what I'm saying is true. I could have just made that all up. But you're saying, why would Daniel make things up, right? So you take me at my word. Here's the thing. For the entire night, everything that she does, 9 times out of 10 are going to fall into that category. What I've done is I've kind of painted this picture and I've said, without you knowing, subconsciously, you agree with everything that I said. Most people, they don't question it. They don't push back against it. They just go, oh, okay, I guess that's what it is. Now, for example, let's say that young lady does something like, you say a joke and she laughs. That might be a genuine laugh. Your first thought is, oh, she probably laughs at everyone's jokes just to make them feel good so she can manipulate them and get something from them. So what happens is no matter what this girl does, everything checks out. It's like a person who believes in horoscopes, right? And they read their horoscope and says, today you're going to have a great day, right? And then when they go to, let's say, Tim Hortons or their local coffee shop, and the barista or the cashier is extra nice to them, they're going to say, wow, this is incredible. I am really having a great day. So what's happening there is when someone gives you this idea, we call this self-fulfilling prophecy. If you tell yourself, I'm going to have a great day today, there's nothing magical about it. There's nothing manifesting about it. It's just your mind wants you to be right. So you're only going to look at the things that prove you right. You're not going to look at the things that prove you wrong. So if I've told you that girl's manipulative and she's two-faced and she's a liar, everything that she does, even if she does something kind for you, like you drop your wallet and you pick it up, she picks it up, you go, oh, she's probably doing that so then she's going to blackmail me and now I owe her because she found my wallet on the ground, right? Even though that might not be the case at all. But because I planted that idea in your head of labeling, now you're looking at her through that tunnel and it can get very dangerous. And it's hard to look at people other than that label. Right? What if people tell you, what if you think that Jordan Peterson is transphobic? What if you think that Dave Chappelle is a hateful, transphobic bigot? Whether they are or aren't is a different story, and I have my opinion on it, but the fact of the matter is this. If you hear that, and if you believe it, no matter how many of their specials you watch or how many of the books they read, you're looking for things that will double down on, you already have your conclusion. And we got to be so careful about this, folks, when we go into discussions or conversations. You've already made up your mind before having the discussion, and I think that's a real problem. Right? Because if you've already made up your mind and you're not willing to change your mind, it's like, well, why are we even doing this? You know? So like the Dave Chappelle case is brilliant because a lot of people see it and they go, man, it's funny, it's comedy, it's humor. And a lot of other people see it and they go, look, I told you, he's just hating on people. He's being mean, he's being disrespectful, he's being insulting. That's not funny. He's using comedy as a disguise to, whatever. And the point that I really want to try to make is, folks, if someone is doubling down and they're going, they're transphobic, I know they are, and they already have their mind made up, my recommendation, don't even bother. Don't even bother. If someone says, hey man, Dave Chappelle's the greatest of all time, okay, great. Hey, Dave Chappelle's a transphobic person, he shouldn't be on Netflix, okay, great. Sometimes you meet people and they're like, oh, okay, there's room for discussion. Other times you meet people with these opinions and they treat their opinions as if they're facts. And this is what I think, so this is how it goes. And what we can do as bystanders is we can take a step back and go, okay, your perception shapes your reality. If you believe this, everything that you see is going to be through this lane, through this tunnel. And anything outside of that tunnel, you're going to look at it as extra noise that you're not going to pay attention to. That's really important to take note of. Going back to the young lady at the party, right? We got to be careful. First of all, what we hear, is it true? And second of all, we got to be aware of the self-fulfilling prophecy and definitely look into this and even YouTube it and go out. Because once you're aware of this, folks, a lot of stuff starts to make more sense, right? A lot of people don't know there's such thing as self-fulfilling prophecy. They go, well, the fortune teller told me I was going to have a great day today, and I did, so she must be right. It's like, well, is that a valid argument? Like, maybe, yeah, sure it is. But is it sound? And what I mean by that is, can we rule out the fact that you didn't just focus on all the good things subconsciously without you knowing about it? Let's say 2 or 3 bad things happen in that day, but your mind doesn't highlight them because it wants you to be right. It doesn't want you to be wrong. We've got something that's known as a false positive. So let's say you go to the doctor and they check you for COVID symptoms. And they say, yep, like you're positive for COVID. You've got symptoms of COVID-19. What this will do, this will freak a person out, right? And this will impact them. One of the biggest ways that it impacts them is your brain will release the hormone of cortisol, which is the stress hormone. And that negatively impacts your immune system, amongst many other things like your appetite and your energy levels. So sometimes what could happen is you go to a psychologist, you go to a doctor, and they misdiagnose you. They go, you've got COVID when you actually don't. Or they go, you're clinically depressed when you're actually not. Mind you, it's rare, but it happens. We're human beings, we make mistakes. And the problem is once you put a label on someone, they internalize it. Like let's say a medical tells me that I'm clinically depressed. Even if I'm going, man, that doesn't seem right, there's going to be a huge voice in my head that says, Daniel, if the medical doctor says it, maybe there's something to it. So that actually starts to make me anxious. I go, oh my God, am I depressed? Do I need to talk to somebody? And that starts to freak me out. So then I stop working out, I stop sleeping well, I stop eating well, and I actually start turning into this crippled shell of myself, making his false positive come true. And then I go, well, look, I'm not sleeping well. I'm anxious all the time. I'm doing really poorly in my exams. He must be right, I am depressed. How do you know if you're actually depressed versus him just telling you, freaked you the F out? So now you're acting a sort of way. Folks, I want to tell you this story that I heard in lecture, and this was really fascinating. For the people who are listening, I mean, you're not going to believe what I'm about to tell you, right? I don't remember all the details exactly, but bear with me, you'll get the main message. There was a researcher at a university who said, I am worried about the diagnosis of people with mental illness. Look, if you've got a tumor, we can scan you and we can see, yep, that's a brain tumor, right? And we can diagnose you. You can't see mental illness. It's hard you can't see depression. You can't see social anxiety disorder, right? So this researcher was like, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to take, let's say, 10 to 20 of my students, because he was also a prof. I want you to go to this mental health institute. This is a real story. And I want you to go there and I want you to say, hey, I'm hearing voices. Like, I think I need to be checked in. Now, mind you, all these students are good. Oh, I apologize. Let me go back. Some of them were students. Some of them were members from the community because he wanted to get a diverse sample size. So for example, that just means you don't want to get 20 people that are all students in psychology. You want to get 2 or 3 psychology students, and he made this invitation open to anyone in the community to come in for an experiment. So he had 2 or 3 construction workers, he had a lawyer, he had, I think, a hygienist. So this way, the sample size is different. It's not just a certain group of people, different ethnicities, political affiliations. So all different ages, from 20 years old to maybe 50 years old. And he got these 20 people and he said, I want you to go to this mental health institute. And I want you to say that you hear voices. Now, all these people are fine. None of them hear voices. They just wanted to lie and see if by lying, they could get admitted into the mental health hospital to show how faulty the diagnosis of mental illness is. So these 20 people go, obviously not at the same time, all in their different times. They go to this mental health hospital and they ask to be checked out by a doctor and they say, I'm hearing voices. And the doctor says, well, what kind of voices? And the researcher had given them like a few things to say, and they said, well, yeah, I hear like a loud voice and it tells me to do this and this. Basically just made stuff up. Out of those 20 people, let's say 20, I don't remember the number exactly. Out of those 20 people, out of all those people who participated in the experiment, who went to the Mental Health Institute, how many of them do you think were accepted? How many of them do you think the doctor looked at and said, yep, yeah, you clearly have a mental illness, when they actually didn't? Every single one of them was accepted. Listen to the words that are coming out of my mouth. 20 people who did not have a mental illness went to a doctor and said, I hear voices. And the doctor said, okay, guess you have a mental illness. And they brought them in as a patient. Now you're listening to this, you're going, Daniel, that's insane. That's crazy. It gets crazier, right? So now you're thinking, okay, well, when they get into the mental health facility, the researcher specifically says, he said, when you go in there, I don't want you to act any differently. I don't want you to behave differently. Behave like you normally would. Just be yourself. And they said, all right. So once they go in, they start acting like themselves, right? For the first few hours, they start walking around, talking to other people, reading books, no erratic behavior. But the staff believed that those people had a mental illness. So they didn't draw a differentiation between them and the people who actually had a mental illness, because they didn't know, right? They just think, well, everyone in this room has a mental illness. So when we talk about labels, that's the label that the staff had. Here's the crazy thing. After a day or something, the participants go, okay, hey, this is actually an experiment. We don't have a mental illness. We'd like to leave. And then the doctor's like, yeah, right. You're not leaving. The doctor did not believe them when they said, we don't have a mental illness. He thought to himself, yeah, that's the mental illness talking. Yeah, sure you don't have a mental illness, buddy. Yeah, for sure. So now, all of a sudden, these participants on their own, they couldn't legally leave the hospital because the doctor and the staff were convinced that they were all mentally ill when none of them were mentally ill. The researcher himself actually had to reach out and say, yeah, man, we had this study. We wanted to come in and do this and that, man. These are all my participants. And it took a couple of days for them to be removed. A couple of days before the doctors were convinced to let them out. After the about 3 or 4 day mark, there were these 2 kids that were law students, and they were getting anxious because they're like, dude, I want to take part in this experiment. I'm falling behind on my work. I got to do homework. So these guys, they would call up their friends or their girlfriends, and they'd drop off their law homework for them. So they would sit in the mental health institute and they'd start doing their law homework because they want to be lawyers, right? And if you had gone up to the staff and asked, hey, what are those guys doing? The staff would roll their eyes, laugh, and say, yeah, that guy thinks he's a law student. Poor guy. They thought that he was so mentally ill that they thought that they were law students, not knowing that they were not mentally ill. They were actually law students and they had midterms coming up. Isn't that insane? Isn't that one of the craziest things that you'll ever hear? The staff had the label that you have a mental illness. So the fact that your girlfriend came, literally dropped off your law homework, she thought that he was so gone mentally that he made his own homework, his buddy had dropped it off, and excuse me, he just did homework just as a mental stimulation. He just made it up. It took about, I want to say 5 days or maybe even 7 days for the hospital, the doctors, the staff to finally give in and accept and let all the participants go. 7 days. The participants, there was at least 1 or 2 participants in there. Those were the law ones. The poor guys who were trying to catch up on homework in the mental health institution. And the staff said, these poor people, man, they think they're students. Well, what can you do? And they'd go up to them and they'd offer them water and stuff. And they'd be like, hey, what are you doing? Law homework. Oh, very nice. And the guy would be like, yeah, I'm trying to be a lawyer someday. She's like, yeah, I bet you are, buddy. I bet you are. And it was crazy, dude. It was a mess. And anyways, eventually all the participants get released. It looks really bad on the mental health hospital. It looks horrific. It was all out in the paper. And it was really shocking because it tells you how bad people are at diagnosing. Here's a caveat onto that story. A few weeks afterwards, or maybe a few months afterwards, the researcher's in his office and he's doing work and he's going over the data and the analysis. And one of the head doctors from that main mental health institute comes over to his office. And he goes, hey, I know about the prank you pulled last time. And I got to hand it to you. You got us. And the researcher goes, it's just for science, please don't take it the wrong way. And the doctor goes, no, I don't. But he says something along the lines of like, fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice, shame on me. He goes, I caught you this time. The researcher says, what do you mean? He goes, you did that last time, and you didn't think that we'd expect you to do it again. Well, guess what? I've identified a series of individuals who have, wink, wink, mental illnesses that I've brought with me here today. The researcher just doesn't say anything. So the guy from the doctor from the mental health institute opens the door, and about 10 to 15 people walk in. And the doctor goes, nice try. Here are the people from your experiment. I'm sorry to say that it didn't work. None of these people actually have mental illnesses. The researcher looks at him and goes, I've never seen these people before in my life. So what had happened was, the doctor now, and I use that term lightly, God bless him, had used that label of, okay, well, if there were a bunch of people in my hospital that we thought had mental illnesses but really didn't, maybe he's done this more than once. Maybe there's other people in my hospital right now that really don't have mental illnesses. So he dragged 10 to 15 poor souls who had genuine mental illnesses, schizophrenia, social anxiety disorder, clinically depressed, and he thought that they were faking it. So he brings them to the researcher and goes, yeah, nice try, buddy. Like, these guys are all faking it. So I don't know what's worse. The fact that you couldn't tell that there were people who were mentally ill in your hospital, or the fact that you took people who were mentally ill and you thought they were faking it. That's bad, isn't it? That's really bad. That's a perfect example of what happens when we have labels, right? When you're looking for something. If I think you have a mental illness, man, I don't care if you're, doing law homework in that example. I really think, man, poor kid thinks he's a law student, right? And again, if you think that they're faking their mental illness, if someone's doing a Twitch or something, you're going, oh, yeah, like she's just a good actress. Come on now, let's go. You don't belong to be in here, which is terrifying. It's absolutely terrifying. I mean, this happened many, many years ago, but it's just such a wild thing to conceptualize. What I hope that story did is it emphasized the importance of labels and what labels do to people. Now, we're talking about it from a micro level. Let's talk about it a little bit more of a macro level. Joe Rogan had this medical expert of CNN on his podcast. And folks, this isn't a political podcast that I do. This isn't about politics or this and that, but it's about the psychology behind it. And long story short, for people who don't know what happened, basically, this is what happened. Imagine if my sister goes around town telling everyone that I have cat food every night, right? And then people say, Daniel, do you have cat food every night? I go, what are you talking about? I go, dude, I have milk every night. Now, milk is cat food. But if you go around telling people that Daniel teaches us cat food every night, they're going to think a few not so good things about me, right? Basically, what had happened was this guy had said something about Joe Rogan, and because Joe got COVID, he took a sort of treatment. They said that he took horse medication, which isn't true. It's a medication that's used for people, but it could also be used for horses. There's like different variations of the medication. And basically what they said was, hey, let's make this dude look stupid. So here's the bad thing, right? Joe sits across from on his podcast and he goes, man, why did you guys lie? Why did you guys openly paint me as this picture, right? He's got tattoos, he's bald, he does martial arts. You want to picture him as this hillbilly guy from the ranch who just started taking a random medication. He said, dude, I was prescribed this by a human being. It's been used on millions of people. The person who created it won the Nobel Prize. Yes, there's a variation of it which is different than the one that I was prescribed that can be used for horses. But there's also a variation that is used for humans. And he's like, why would you lie? Why would you actively lie? And the other guy there's like, yeah, we shouldn't have lied, Here's the problem. Folks, it's not about who's right and who's wrong and making fun of people and shaming them. Is when you are a news network and you're in charge of the news and the people start to think that you have a narrative, that you show the news in a bias, that's going to destroy the trust between the people and the news. So now, if the majority of the people have this label on CNN as, I can't trust this company, guess what happens when CNN comes on tonight and they say, hey, COVID cases have been going up, really need you to be vaccinated. People who are vaccinated have a 90% chance of staying alive if they get COVID compared to people who have, whatever. All of a sudden, those people who go, well, you're a liar, CNN. You lied about Joe Rogan. You're trying to fit a narrative, so you're lying about COVID cases. Do you hear what I'm saying? The line doesn't stop. If I think that the news networks have a narrative and there's a bias, anything that you say, I'm going to be hesitant towards. If they literally come out and say, hey, we found out that exercising can help lower the chances of you developing cancer, I don't know if that's true. I'm just saying that. But I believe, let's not say that factually, because I can't refer to any peer-reviewed article right now. But let's say they were to come out for the sake of argument. There's a bunch of people, I promise you, who take a sit back and go, why? What are you trying to do? What are you trying to sell me? Are you trying to sell me the Bowflex, the treadmill? So these labels are in every part of our life, and we see it all the time. And my big worry with that was, Joe sat down, he looked him in the eyes, and he goes, man, you lied. You actively lied. And then that goof went back onto his program with his other dude, and they said, no, we didn't lie. We didn't lie. It is used for horses. That'd be like my sisters being like, no, I didn't lie. Daniel does have cat food. Milk is cat food, so therefore I didn't lie by saying that Daniel has cat food every night. It's like, dude, you're either a moron who lacks self-awareness or you're a scumbag. You are such a scumbag, a two-faced scumbag. And the horrible thing is that you've turned the people against you. And not only that, man, CNN, your brand, some other poor journalist who would have never said that, now he looks bad because he's got his goddamn name tag which says like from CNN under it. It was bad. It was really, really bad. I think it's bad for people. I think it was bad for trust. I think it was bad for the media. I mean, and not to say CNN is the only media outlet which lies or which has a narrative. And most places do. Most things do. Right? So when people say, I don't know why podcasts are getting so popular. I don't know why Joe Rogan has 11 million followers. Like, you don't know? It's because of garbage like that, dude. Because at least with Joe, call him whatever you will, man, we know he doesn't have an agenda. He doesn't have a narrative. He brings on the Ben Shapiro's. He brings on the Bernie Sanders. It's a 2-hour, 3-hour discussion. It's not about selling something. It's not about just promoting something. It's two people having an organic conversation. And what people are finding out is they're going, man, we're getting more unbiased news from these YouTubers and these podcasters than we are from the actual news. In my opinion, in the next 5 to 10 years, there will be, even though there are some right now, but I think there's going to be a plethora of podcasters who have a greater following than those news networks because they present things unbiasedly. And folks, it's not about who's the best news network or who's the best news presenter. It's about the public's perception. Do I think that you are unbiased? Yes? Okay, then I can trust you. If I think that you are biased, that you're untrustworthy, that you tilt the truth to fit your own narrative, man, that's terrible. That it doesn't matter how good of a news network you are, it turns people against each other and we become tribalistic. And we gotta be so careful not to. And I see it everywhere. I see it with Joe Rogan. I see it with Dave Chappelle. I see it with all these other avenues. The antidote to labels, in my opinion, is two things: open-mindedness and curiosity. Open-mindedness means you're open to being wrong. It means you're open to having your mind change. It means that you don't have an ego. You're not attached to an idea, but you're detached. Meaning, if the idea changes or if the idea gets attacked, you're not getting attacked, right? It's not about the idea, it's about you. And secondly, it's curiosity. You gotta be curious. As someone who's a huge fan of, let's say, Dave Chappelle's art form, I have to be curious and go, what do you hear that sounds transphobic to you? That I don't hear. Like, I'm genuinely curious. You are so sure and you're so confident. And I'm not calling you sensitive. I'm not calling you a snowflake. But for someone who's listened to his comedy, and he's talked about some dark things, man. School shootings, black people, white people, Asian people, molestation, sexual assault, religion, right? And all those things. And I've never heard a peep of backlash. But now when he's talking about transgender people, there's a lot. So my thing is, man, when you hear people who disagree with you, or when you hear people who, be careful not to put labels on them. You like Dave Chappelle? I guess you're homophobic, transphobic, misogynist, blah, blah, you know what I mean? Because if you do that, well, now you cut off. You're like, I don't want to communicate to a transphobic, misogynistic, woman-hating. Like, you just start making things up without you knowing, because you've made this narrative in your head. And the other side is the exact same. Oh, you don't think Dave Chappelle's funny? You must be one of these snowflake, sensitive, blah, 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 blah. Like, dude, don't. Because when you do that, you cut off communication, at least you blocking people and minding your own business. So in my 2 cents, I like to think about open-mindedness. I like to think about curiosity. What do you think, folks? What do you think about the episode that you heard? What did you think about that nuts mental health institution story? What do you think about labels, the stuff that's going on with Dave Chappelle right now, the distrust in the media? It's crazy. And like one thing that people will find is in this podcast, even though it's psychology based, there's psychology in everything, right? Trust, the psychology of relationships, the psychology of labels, the psychology of mental. So it's in all over the place. So sometimes you might listen and go, why is he talking about MMA? Why is he talking about Joe Rogan? Like, there's so many little things because of psychology is the study of the mind and brain functioning and thoughts and feelings and behavior, right? It's involved all around us. So we can really talk about a lot of things. Folks, thank you very much for listening. Have an absolutely amazing day and take care of yourselves. You'll hear from me again next week. Take care, everybody. Bye-bye.